Okay, so we're recording the meeting of the ISCET clinical eye tracking use survey, and this is the working group working on the first draft of the manuscript, where we're aiming to report the results from the survey. So we've got a first draft of a document. The idea is that we've had some suggestions that people sign up to work on different sections. So I see that a couple of people have done that already. If you haven't already done so and you feel like putting your name next to a section, that would be really great. And then hopefully we'll meet as a group to then discuss progress and answer any queries to allow people to move forward with their section. As a reminder, we've talked about this being prepared as a manuscript to be submitted to Documenta Ophthalmologica, which is the journal of ISEV. And there is a fee to publish in there, but my institution have an agreement with them, so they would cover that fee if I was named as the corresponding author. So I just assumed that would be okay, but if that's not with anybody, maybe just drop me an email privately just to say that you're not happy, and we'll discuss an alternative way forward for that. Fiona?
I just wanted to ask really quickly, does that journal have by any chance a LaTeX template, or is it just for the practical point of view?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let me just pop their link in the chat. So do you mean like a template for reporting outcomes?
I just mean an article template, like because I see here the manuscript is currently formatted for, but which manuscript is that? Do we have that here?
So I did that. Basically, I've taken the author guidelines from the website, and as much as I can in this current format, obviously this is just a Google Docs thing, so but I've tried to put the section headings in the orders they need to be, check the word counts and so on. The formatting of the citations would come later. You can't do reference management through Google Docs, but I presume that when we get to a later stage, this will be moved into Word or maybe LaTeX, and then appropriately done from there. But I don't think they have a LaTeX template, but certainly they have all the guidance, on the author guidelines for that.
Okay,
yeah,
it's a lot more work in Word. That's why I'm asking. It's a lot more work to compile a document in Word than LaTeX. So just, I'm very happy to make beautiful lists of citations in LaTeX, but in Word, that's not a job I even would know how to approach.
I would assume it doesn't have LaTeX, but I'm not sure. But most of the clinical, because it's mostly clinical based, hopefully they have dual, but I would assume there might be a Word time. But let's see. But anyway, it's a teamwork, so we will manage that hopefully.
Yeah, I don't mind which system is used ultimately for the document. I know that typically clinical journals tend to be expecting a kind of Word formatted type thing rather than engineering style, which is LaTeX, but either's fine by me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just quickly scrolling through and I can't see it. Yeah, manuscripts should be submitted in Word.
Okay, Word's done, fine.
Manuscripts with mathematical content can also be submitted in LaTeX. And then we recommend using Springer's Nature's LaTeX template.
Okay, that's, from my point of view, great news. It's not easy to do any math in Word. Yeah.
There's the submission guidelines, and it's under text and text formatting. I was assuming we'd be submitting in Word, but if people feel like there's a reason to do otherwise. Okay. So I was assuming that we would be able to just use Google Docs to try and get the content down to begin with, and then when we get towards more of a manuscript, we can then decide whether Word is going to be better or whether we feel there's sufficient maths involved to go for an alternative. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody who's looked at the document already and added some questions. There are obviously different categories that you can submit under. The options for this are under guidelines or under original research. Matt has already added a comment that he feels like it fits original research better. Does anybody, I feel like we're not producing a guideline here. I feel like we're reporting results of a survey. So is everybody happy that we proceed with this to be
Yes.
research?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. If I could spell, that would be helpful. Okay. So if we kind of go forward to the manuscript, which is on page 2. Actually, let's just go forward to the, so there's nothing written for the introduction section already. So I can see Siwan and Fiona have both written their names down for the introductory section. So feel free to make a start on the draft of that. That would be great. I don't feel like that needs to be lengthy, but obviously we do need to introduce the work and where that's kind of come from. Are you guys happy to just make a start with all of that? Yes, Fiona?
I'm very happy to take a run at that. What would be really useful, if you have it, would be the initial email sent out to the community so that we can frame it in the introduction properly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gemma, can I ask, do you have any deadline to apply and submit this journal?
I don't think we have any journal deadlines that I'm aware of.
For submission, like what's the planned date to submit? Because really a little bit busy, and if you set a date, I try to make it happen.
Okay. I think everybody will probably agree with that, Sue. That's probably a good suggestion. I don't think we have any journal deadlines. I think we can probably set our own. What do people feel is a sensible yet constructive deadline to work towards? Denise?
It's good to have a sort of timeline rather than a deadline necessarily. It will help when you sort of allocate sections for different people to write to ask them when it's a reasonable time for them to do the work, because some sections may take a bit longer than others. You know, like an introduction, a brief introduction might not take quite so long as writing up the results, for example, if there's any additional analyses that need to be done and that sort of thing. And then my other comment is just going back to what you said earlier about what type of article this is. It is research. It's mixed method research, because you've got both quantitative or semi-quantitative and qualitative information from the surveys. And
Yeah.
the third and last thing I just wanted to say was I have a student who was doing some eye tracking actually with patients with me, and he's very keen to help with this manuscript, and I could suggest that he does any section that you want him to do. Really, he's a medical student, and they're generally very keen, so just let me know what you think would be most useful.
Thanks, Denise. Oh, I wonder if Denise has accidentally left. So I agree, it's mixed methods research, and back again. Hi, Denise. I would agree that it's
the wrong button. I'm not so used to Google Meet. I didn't mean to offer that and immediately leave.
Oh, don't worry.
Yeah.
So I would say I agree, it's mixed methods. We've got some kind of numerical data as well as free text comments that we've got from the questionnaire. What do people feel about a medical student joining us and helping write various sections? And Fiona?
Like, students obviously are great at pushing work forward. I also have quite a few students who could jump in, but maybe it's worth first putting a draft together ourselves, and then opening it up to a bigger group to input when we have something on a page to discuss.
Denise?
This may be just my preferred way of working, but I quite like the students to search the literature, put all that information together, and then come in afterwards and revise it down and edit it to make it clearer. They're really good at kind of searching literature and finding studies. They're maybe less good at interpreting them in quite the right way and putting, that finessing it in quite the right way. But to actually do the sort of grunt work, so they're pretty good.
If I can respond, I totally agree with that, but I think if it's a kind of free for all and there's nothing in the section, then that can get quite messy. But if there's at least the structure of what we want to contain and it's framed according to how people were invited to participate and so on, just to get that general to specific kind of structure, then I think their input would be much more productive if we provide the structure first. Just a suggestion.
Go for it, Matt.
Yeah, I just say I agree with that, and I think with Denise saying, coming in maybe with the list of citations that could be used that are relevant, that's helpful, and that could happen afterwards, as Fiona was suggesting. I also want to just point out that we don't have to be necessarily siloed into whatever section we've initially said we'd tackle. I put my name next to methods, but I'm happy to jump around after having done that. It was just really.
Oh, Matt freezed.
Yeah. I wonder if he was about to say it was just really to get things going and get things kick-started.
Yeah.
That we weren't all working on the same bit.
Yeah, it's much easier to do that when you have something on a page as opposed to nothing. So,
yeah. Does anybody have any objections to a keen bean medical student joining the team and helping push things along a little bit?
I don't mind. Especially with the introduction. Yeah, especially with the introduction, yeah.
Yeah,
really
well,
helpful.
I don't mind the concept of course, if anyone would join, if there would be a place for contribution. But as I see, the current situation is that Siwan and Fiona already would do the introduction. So I would rather see the progress of the group, and then if we find that we need to someone to contribute more, then we can, of course, as he's already working with Dennis, then I would assume that already you'd be a good contribution. But I mean it was already the same call from the same group that we were all aligned, I think, for a couple of months. So my suggestion would be, let's see how the introduction goes, and we already have Fiona and Siwan, and then I think it would be, as we said, if we set a timeline and we find that it's kind of we're lagging behind that, then we definitely would benefit from more people.
Okay, so
that's my
okay
view. But I have no objection to the concept itself. I mean, just like the.
So in terms of a timeline, then what is going to reasonably work for people? Because if people are under a lot of time pressure and don't have time at the moment, then that might encourage us to bring a keen medical student on board a bit earlier. So if we're talking about working on this and then having another meeting to kind of answer queries and push things along, would people be able to do that in the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks, or is that going to be prohibitive for people being involved?
Yeah, I think it's 3 to 4 weeks for the first version. That'd be reasonable. Yeah.
Okay, Onyeka?
Yeah, I was to say 3 weeks is ideal as well. 4 weeks might be stretching it too long. I won't
Yeah, okay.
become too lazy about it, but 3 weeks is just ideal.
Okay.
That would
And
work fine for me too.
yeah, so if we have that as our outline suggestion, we can see how much progress has been made. If we're feeling like a keen medical student will help push things along a little bit more, would that be okay, Denise, with you? Yeah, okay. I did have another comment from Amanda that so late in the day UK time's not great for Australia time. So what I'll try and do is find an earlier time. Is that the same for you, Siwan? Is that?
Yeah, that's okay. I think it's good to have an earlier time if it doesn't bother you at all. But because today I work late, so I can join the meeting. Yeah, I have a deadline to catch today, so
Okay,
that's
okay.
fine.
I think sometimes varying the time is helpful because then it helps catch different people, doesn't it? So I will try and find an earlier time for the next.
I can push it like 2 hours earlier, but then more than that, I guess it depends on the day because I have like clinic in the morning.
Okay.
But of course, like that's only me, but whatever suits everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Rasha. So should we have a look at some of the queries that have arisen and try and answer those as best we can? Hi, Matt.
Hello again. Do you hear me?
We
Yes.
do indeed, yeah.
The video is not back yet, but there's someone doing some work downstairs in the house, and they've conveniently disconnected the internet whilst I was here. Anyway, I'll let you carry on.
So where we got to, Matt, was we talked about 3 weeks' time being a reasonable time for us to have the next meeting to make sure we all work on the manuscript. And if at that 3 week point we were finding that we needed a bit of an injection of an additional medical student to push things along a bit further, we thought we'd make that decision at that time. Would that be okay for you?
I agree, yeah. So what's the aim to, where do we want to get it to within those 3 weeks? Is it like a structure, a full like first draft?
Yeah, we said about if we could answer some of these queries today and then after 3 weeks have each section with an outline as a draft.
Yep.
With people adding queries if there were any, and then we'll try and answer those.
Great, okay.
Either by email or by call if needed.
Fine. I just wanted to follow up on something Fiona pointed out, which was you wanted to see copies of the emails from the introductory, kind of what had been sent out in order to flesh out the introduction. Do you want the kind of the way that we actually contacted the people that were participating in the survey, or do you mean how we just kind of came to the conclusion that we should produce a survey in the first place?
I was assuming you meant the wording, Fiona, so.
I guess I mean both. I mean, the context and the description of any questionnaire is going to greatly influence the responses, right? So just from the point of view of, good science, just including in the introduction, when we get to the specific before the method, how people were recruited, or, that might go into the method section, but just some reference to what the motivation was and how that was expressed to the participants would be good to make sure that we don't veer from that.
Great. Okay, I'll try and summarize that and send that over to you then.
Yeah, or if you want to, you can just send me the original text, and that's also fine. I can.
It was really borne out through the ISCET meetings as in the purpose for it to happen. So obviously that's all contained within the meeting recordings, but that's quite a lengthy set of videos to go looking through. So.
Oh yeah, no, I wouldn't suggest that. It's more about what the respondents got.
Oh, I see. Well, I think we did have a fairly set of words, didn't we? But we didn't all send it in exactly the same format.
Yeah.
I know that I had a template that I sent out to a lot of people, but sometimes people had personal connections within organizations.
Sure, I was one of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just anything that went out to frame or describe the task is good to have to hand so that we frame it correctly.
I'll forward that to you then after this meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Lovely. So, and then the next thing, so there's nothing there for the introduction at the moment, but hopefully after Fiona and C1 have attacked that a little bit, there'll be more to talk about next time. Some of these are just quick. So Matt, the ethics approval number, yes, that was just kind of part of it. So there's a bare bones of a methods. There's a couple of queries about how we present some of the, I guess, raw background information that helps kind of explain what we did in either appendices or kind of, sometimes journals have e-supplements, don't they? So I think what I'll do is just check what we can submit along with the manuscript. But I think some of that raw background information is useful to submit as an appendix if we can. That's your comment about an appendix. Is Matt frozen again? Yeah.
Or very, very still.
Check appendix. Okay, journal requirements. So there's a few kind of, here's Matt back again. Hi, Matt.
Hello. I've set myself up a hotspot now, so that should be okay.
That's okay. We're just saying that it's probably good for us to check the journal requirements regarding the appendix and some of the background information, because I think things like a list of 90 organisations that were contacted, we don't really want that kind of taking up all the word count. So I think if we can have an e-supplement or an appendix, that would be really helpful. And then there's not really much else there for the methods other than the kind of the distribution and the information that was distributed. So I think the rest of the... Is everybody happy that we move on from the methods, or do you feel, so that's Matt, me, Rasha and Fiona, do we feel like we're just going to flesh that out a little bit? I mean, we don't want to overload that section if there's not much else to say.
I would just point out that we should probably have like the platform that it was distributed on and all this sort of stuff in there.
I think it does have Qualtrics written in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing that's really missing from that is the bit that says the survey questions are available ... and then we haven't yet decided how to present those, but that will obviously take up a bulk of it, or it could be another appendix. I'm just trying to find out now from the submission guidelines as to how appendices should be presented, because obviously we will want to provide that information somehow.
Yeah. Supplementary information.
That's it, yeah.
Accepts other supplementary files to be published online.
Okay, straight ahead, I'll just change that to supplementary information then, so we're at least...
Yeah, it just says check the journal's research data policy. We encourage research data to be archived in repositories where possible. But it's not really research data, is it? It's more... I would say it fits more with supplementary information than research data. Okay. So any questions about the methods before we move on to talk about the results? Okay. So I think I felt that with the results, I was getting to the stage where I couldn't see the wood for the trees, really, at which point Amanda emailed and said, can I make some suggestions? And I said, please do. Because I think sometimes you can just get a little bit overloaded with words and numbers. So it's just to try and present the results as succinctly as possible without just producing a massive table of everything. And my question, I guess, for the group was that we probably need to decide whether we're presenting the results by the group that they are, their respondent type, or whether we're going to try and collate all of the responses to each question together and report the results by respondent type. So accepting that they had very slight variations in the wording of the question, depending on if they're a manufacturer or a clinician. But I was just going a little bit round in circles, so I would really appreciate everybody's input on that.
Can I just ask a clarifying question then? Do you intend to do any analysis?
So,
as in differential analysis? Because I think that would affect whether or not you divide it into groups or keep it as one. You know, you're going to have different power.
Yeah, I think when you kind of break the numbers down, some of the responses of some of the groups are quite small. And so I'm struggling to see how you might do analysis of their responses compared, other than, I guess that this is the stage, this is the sticking point I was getting to. Are we just going to be reporting this descriptively? Because I was struggling to see how some of it could be compared and analysed in that way. Anyeka, go for it.
Yeah, I was the one who wrote that comment, the anonymous. I didn't log in then, so my name doesn't show, but I strongly feel we should collate the responses based on the topics and the questions. And then, for example, if we're presenting it in a pie chart, for example, and then we show the manufacturers, the percentage of manufacturers that said that, or the percentage of clinicians that said this. So I think it's more presentable that way to collate it based on, even though the sentences or the way we ask the questions are not the same, but I feel it's better if we're able to explain that this is what we want from the respondents and this is the percentage of people who gave these answers based on the groups. I think it makes more sense that way.
Thanks, Anyeka. Any other points there?
Just to add that I think that sounds nice, and in a sense, it's like rather than presenting the question, you focus on the answer and the split or the different types of people who give a certain answer. But I think that just even reporting percentages of each group in some cases, or at the start just being really clear about what the group is composed of in terms of these different roles, and then following it with, maybe we find on some questions there's a big split that's obvious between maybe clinicians and researchers or something like this, but on other questions there isn't. So then you could make, if it's interesting because there is an obvious split in the answers along some of these groups, then it's worth analysing if that difference is significant. But if there isn't, then I would say there's no point in analysing further.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Hi, Denise. Go for it.
How many groups do you think there are that are sufficiently large to break down the responses by group?
So we've got 35 perform eye tracking and interpret the results, 2 of perform eye tracking but don't interpret, 7 don't do the eye tracking but they interpret or use the results recorded by others, 9 professional body responses, 17 manufacturer, and then 10 that selected other, and a number of those added comments to describe their role. And they varied from researcher, performing clinical eye tracking, but up to
think,
funders.
do you think we could put the responses, the 2 and the 7, together with the 35? Would that be reasonable? Because they're
all clinicians, right?
They either perform
They all
or interpret. And then you've got the manufacturer group, and then you've got the other group. So then you've got 3 groups. So then you can look at
bodies.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Oh, sorry.
So then we've got kind of 4 groups essentially.
That's sort of manageable. You could look at the responses overall and then by group. And if you're thinking about doing pie charts, as Onyeka was suggesting, which I think is a really good idea, then you could have sort of a multi-panel figure that does that. You know, panel A would be responses overall, and B to E, I guess, would be the subgroups.
Okay. Nice suggestion.
Yeah.
Any advice? Go for it, Fiona.
I was going to add that if you're getting up to like 30 people in a group, then you're at statistical power for analysis to see, is this spurious or is this likely a real difference? So that would make sense to collate, to have about 30 or so in each.
Yeah, I mean, we won't get to 30 in each subgroup, but I think that probably nicely combines those little smaller numbers.
Yeah, even if it was just the people who interpret results of eye tracking versus those who don't, that's a fine 2 groups to compare. Just as an example, I think. But I think that it depends on what the answers are, whether it's interesting to report them or not. Because if there isn't a difference between clinicians and researchers or whatever, then we don't need to take up space saying there's no difference other than, you know, we don't need to report numbers for it unless there is a difference. Maybe.
I don't think we'll have sufficient that don't interpret the results. But I think we would have, we could, if we combined the first 3 kind of doing it in some way, either performing it or interpreting, then you've got the professional body, then you've got the manufacturer, and then people who were just other. I guess the other is, it's whether we kind of allocate them to another group.
Gemma, sorry to interrupt. I was just looking at the numbers because if we combined that first group that either does tracking or interprets it, that's 44, isn't it? And then the other groups are 9, 17, and 10. But that doesn't add up to 123.
Yeah.
Oh, 43 didn't respond to any.
Yeah.
But
so
that doesn't add up to 80, does it?
So we've got 79 participants responded to at least 1 question. So it should, does it add up to 79?
Yeah, okay.
But then I
probably is right.
But then we probably shouldn't say so we're saying that we sent it out to 123 and then we report that whatever percentage of them responded?
No, so this is 123 responses where they have opened the survey, read the participant information and clicked consent to share their results, but a number of them then didn't give any responses. But in previous discussions about that, we said we would be as transparent as possible, reporting the exact numbers that did and didn't respond to different things. So they've actively engaged with it and given consent, but then not given a response.
And I remember that we weren't, if I remember correctly, we weren't sure if it was the same people.
So what I've done is, what did we check? So there was some discussion about IP address.
Yeah, I remember.
And they were checked. So none of the responses come from the same IP address. And I've also, so it looks like there's two different responses from the same place of work, but they do kind of clearly differentiate that they're different people. So we haven't removed any responses as spurious responses.
I think it's also worth just reminding that where we've written to an organization, that doesn't mean that we're expecting one response back, right? We could be expecting 100 responses from one organization, just to clarify that point about percentage of responses.
Yeah, and so from the manufacturers, we've got people who've reported being involved with the same manufacturer, but we haven't just counted one response from them. We've counted each as an individual.
That makes sense. I guess I'm not sure if, like, it's good to say this number of people signed in, read the questions, hit consent, but didn't answer any questions. But then I don't feel like we should include them as respondents from that point on.
Okay.
I agree with that.
I think the issue is just making sure that we know what the denominator is in all sort of analyses. So I agree, we shouldn't include those ones that haven't responded to anything. But is the denominator 79 for every single question? I don't think it is it? Because different people answered different questions.
Yeah, I don't know.
Looks like it sums to 80.
Yeah, I'm going to have to double check that.
5, 7, 44, 53.
That's right, Denise. There was some manufacturers had different questions. For example, we felt that some questions weren't relevant for other people, so it won't be divided by 79 or 80 or whatever it is for every single question.
I'll double check that number, Fiona, in those different categories.
Yeah, it looks like it sums to 80, but just before we move on, like it says here, I was suggesting that you have the people who do interpret eye tracking data and those who don't. And here it seems to be summing people who explicitly say they do not interpret as part of the same group as those who don't. But I think that if you were just to say you do or you don't interpret the results, and then manufacturers and so on, these other groups that are not explicitly saying they interpret results, it might be pretty equal groups there.
But we've only got 2 people who don't interpret the results.
But if we say involved with a manufacturer of devices, then they're not clinically interpreting results. Is that a fair assumption?
I don't know that I would make that assumption.
I guess it depends on how the question was framed, which I don't remember right now. Because are these all responses to the same question group?
Yeah, so this table here that we are having a look at, this is how it was worded on the stem that they ticked.
And they could only tick one. Or they could tick multiple.
I think for this, I'd have to check.
But we can follow up on it. But my point is that that would kind of dictate whether or not you could consider these 2 groups or not, right? Like whether they can only answer once.
Thanks, Denise.
Oh,
One possible complication with that is that the way that the survey was structured was that all the clinicians went down one route of questions and the manufacturers had a different set of questions. I mean, there was overlap considerably. So if you start lumping clinicians in with manufacturers, it becomes very difficult to then pull out the number of respondents in that mixed group, because for some of the questions at least.
Sure, that's why I'm asking about the structure, because if these are all responses that are, you can only give a single response, then perform clinical eye tracking and interpret the results. A manufacturer could answer that.
Yeah, but was that?
I
feel
will
like that
check.
was a different. One of the choices was manufacturer. One of the choices was, perform and analyze. I think, but maybe Gemma can find out.
At any
Yeah.
rate, the point is that the way this is structured would dictate whether or not we can consider various groups. It depends on whether they had to choose one answer or could answer several.
They could only choose one.
Right.
And I think when we put this together, we said if you feel like you meet more than one, please complete the survey in one capacity and then complete it again in your other capacity. So if they were involved with the manufacturer and doing clinical, we asked them to complete it just with one response and then complete it again with another.
Oh, was it stated to complete it with I do remember that we told them like something like check what fits you more and proceed with it.
Yeah,
I
we
do
did
remember
have
that,
this.
but the other part, of course, you remember better.
You say
I mean,
that,
it
Rasha.
I mean, it wasn't optional anyway. So I mean, it was like he has to choose, even if he fits both, which one fits better. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
But
We worded this as, if more than one option is applicable to you, please select the option that best describes your involvement and complete the survey in that capacity. You may complete the survey multiple times in alternative capacities if this is relevant by selecting an alternative option.
Okay.
But
So
it seems like they didn't do that, right? Because we didn't get the same IP.
Yeah, so we have no duplicate IP.
Right. So that's good that it's mutually exclusive, because that
Yeah.
means that we can form sensible groups here to compare.
Yeah, I think the only the only time where that didn't is where we get two responses from people from the same working location, but that it was clear in their responses that they were different individuals. But yeah,
But this is good. That means we can compare groups statistically, and it looks like we have pretty even ones, even sized ones, about 30, with more than 30 in each if we just go with the interpretation of eye data as the differentiator. Maybe it's a suggestion.
So I think Denise's original suggestion was to put those three categories together, but you're saying, should we put those not interpreting the results?
Well, what was the logic behind them being one category? Just that it was clinical.
Yeah, that they are actually doing something in a clinical capacity, either performing or interpreting or doing both.
Okay. So from working in clinics using eye tracking, like balance clinics and so on, you could have like a clinical assistant who's doing a test, but literally just looks to see, do they get the green light from the system, and they never go into the data, but they're still clinical, right?
Yeah.
So then the question is, given that, and given that you might have researchers who are actually taking diagnostic measures from patients, maybe the interpretation is the better logical basis for their different interaction with iData as a suggestion. Because there's so many crossover of roles. Like, I mean, a lot of people are both clinicians and researchers and so on. So, and you can have clinicians who really don't ever go into the data itself. They just look at the end result of a standard test.
Yeah, I think we can assume that the people that are involved with a professional body aren't doing the testing or the interpreting. They're just answering on behalf of their professional body. I'm just struggling a little bit with the manufacturer, that we're making an assumption there about exactly what their role involves. I think I'm just, yeah, I don't really think we've framed the question in that way to be sure that putting those with the manufacturers is the best way forward. What do other people think on that? Matt might have to unmute.
I just say I think both work in different ways. You know, they both make sense. The only one that I think it's slightly more complicated if you mix manufacturers with clinicians on the basis of how we've got different questions that those groups did. But I think I like the idea that we're grouping them in that way. But I just think it's then going to be more cumbersome to analyze because of the fact that there's some people in that group would have done one question set and others would have done another one.
Yeah. Yeah, so clinician only questions. I'm just trying to look at I'm just looking back at the final version to see which route they were fed down.
I'm wondering if it actually matters that much that we do compare between the groups. You know, really, we're just trying to look. I mean, you can present the different information from the different groups, but do we actually need to make a comparison of manufacturers thought this and clinicians thought this? Is that even a useful thing to be asking?
I don't know, but I think it's those who really are clinicians and perform themselves. I think that we need to also to highlight their voice, because that's the main thing we're doing. So, and then everyone else, of course. But I mean, this specific category is what we're focusing on.
And I think that clinicians and manufacturers have very different motivations and feelings towards something like guidelines.
That's a good point.
So for a clinician, a guideline helps them interpret, and it helps ensure that how they're interpreting them is comparable to other clinicians. But for manufacturers, guidelines may be seen very differently, that even negatively, depending on what the guideline is. And so then it could be worth seeing if they differ on certain questions, I would argue.
Okay, so on that basis, should we just split it by clinicians versus manufacturers versus professional bodies?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm kind of leaning towards that because of, as you say, those are the question blocks that they've answered. And then we've got this kind of other group. It's whether we keep them as a self-selected kind of other group, or whether we feel that some of those responses can be reliably put into a different category. This was obviously their responses that they felt that they weren't captured by the other descriptors.
Are there any of those that you feel you can confidently file into a different group?
There seems to be only 7 responses, so some of them didn't specify.
Yeah, so 3 of them didn't give didn't add any free text.
I think we probably would need to junk those then, because if they haven't given us any context, they might just be a researcher, which we were explicitly removing.
Well, it says interdisciplinary researcher.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's whether we just kind of keep those as other and report them separately, or whether, I know when we've talked about removing data from the questionnaire, others have felt strongly that we shouldn't remove data, we should just report it as it is. Because one says not involved in it, but strongly connected to the eye tracking market. So you could argue that their responses are more aligned with a manufacturer, but they've not selected that. So maybe we should just keep them as other and describe it as accurately as we can. Because then at least that helps other people in the future. If this was to be repeated and compared, at least then you could probably word those categories slightly differently to better describe. So maybe it's better to just keep it as other.
Yeah, I think you could argue from both, because there's one here who says clinical neuro-ophthalmologist. So
Yeah.
That's a clinician then.
that's a clinician.
Yeah, that's an easy one to start. So
Interdisciplinary researcher, that means that they collect and interpret results. I mean, that it doesn't seem a stretch, but if someone is connected to the market, I mean, that to me sounds like an investor in eye tracking, actually, which is nothing whatsoever to do with the eye data quality or anything. It's just they're interested.
But they might fall under manufacturer, because a manufacturer,
Yeah.
if somebody was an investor in a company, the head of a company, they know nothing about eye tracking, they still might
Yeah.
answer as a manufacturer.
Yeah, but I think maybe this is really about, it depends which question you're asking, what way to group them. And you don't have to just group them the same way for every question, so long as you're explicit about it. But for some questions where you're talking about guidelines and so on, like maybe that's most relevant to the people who actually interpret eye data and handle it, rather than people who just use the results of it for something. And so maybe for questions like that about guidelines or about, you know, how useful they are, then it could make more sense to make the division according to, I actually work with the data and interpret it versus I don't. But for other questions, maybe different groupings are more appropriate and are relatively simple.
I agree with that. I think as long as you make it very clear our rationale for doing so, otherwise it looks like we're just trying to fudge the results, then I think that's a good way of thinking it. And then sometimes we can use the sum total of all the results, and sometimes we split them out.
Yeah, and then for example, if we wanted to compare clinicians to everyone else, we can say in other, we had several responses that clearly were clinicians, e.g. elected, describe themselves as clinical neuro-ophthalmologists. So you don't need a one-size-fits-all. You just do it by what makes sense for the question and go through each research question that we have.
Okay.
Like that.
Should we, if we're going to do that, I feel like it might be worth us doing a kind of blind version of categorizing what way we're going to analyze each response, i.e. not looking at the actual responses. Otherwise, we could be accused by a reviewer of having cherry-picked which ones we were going to divide and which ones we weren't. So we need, you know, an exercise whereby we decide before looking at the data. Yeah,
for me, my instinct would be start with the research questions. If you list the research questions, then underneath each question, you can write a sensible way to approach that and what groups you might like to compare for that question. And actually, for me, even if I was writing the introduction or anything, I would really benefit from a clear list of research questions we aim to answer at this point already.
Yeah, and I think if I send you as well the final version of the survey, because we did clearly lay out the purpose as like 3 different points. So I think if we send you those kind of original documents, I think that will help with the structuring of it.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the motivation and framing that I was thinking about earlier. But I think a separate issue is the actual research questions to answer, the hypothesis, if you like.
Yeah.
Because then they should come at the end of the introduction and then should dictate really any analysis, right?
Okay. So I'm aware we're probably at time already, slightly over. Shall we proceed with our original plan to work on our individual sections or in those kind of small groups and meet in the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks? Fiona, I think as we're working on the results, I think if we kind of are mindful that you'll try and aim to do that, to be explicit about what the questions are at the end of the introduction section, I think that'll help us structure the results.
You mean that I should come up with the research questions, or?
No, I think that they are within those documents that you've asked for. So I think it will be clear. And then if you feel like it's not clear enough from there, let's discuss.
Okay.
Oh, I have a quick question. Do we
Rasha.
have like somewhere the non-anonymous like results of the survey? Because I'm not sure.
Yes. Is that you should?
Where they
Can you
are.
see that in the folder?
Okay. Okay, I'll have a look.
If you can't see that, Rasha, let me know. Onyeka.
Ask if you could please share that document with all of us so that we can know the research questions and know what we're working with, especially with the results as well, as we help with writing the draft.
Yeah, I'll do that as well. Okay, will do.
Can I
Matt?
add one more thing, which is if we're communicating with regards to how decisions about this project offline, ideally we should post that on the forum, and then maybe we can alert each other by email to the fact that it's on the forum, just to keep all the ISCET communications transparent.
I would love a link to the forum. I don't think I've ever been there.
Yeah, I will send it to you.
Sorry, Matt. Say that again.
Sorry, I'm encouraging use of the forum on the website. Because that way all the communications and decisions made by ISCET remain transparent. That's the purpose of it. It's here, and there's a specific sub forum for this subcommittee. But obviously, people might miss that if it's just on the website. So we need to kind of post your message on this, and then drop an email to each other to say that it's on there. I know it's a bit circuitous, but at the moment, it's sort of the best way we have of keeping things transparent.
Okay.
Would it be okay if at the moment I just put them directly into the text here where I'm writing? Like questions and comments and things just for as I go? That would be how I would usually work. Like if I'm not sure something or whatever, I'll just put it in as a comment in the text as I work. Is that okay?
That's fine. And I'm kind of periodically saving that with a date on it so that we've got a trail of like previous things. So even if comments are resolved, we've got a copy of what comments were along the way.
Yeah, and the resolved comments are still saved here on Google Docs too. The whole history is there.
Yeah.
Every single letter that's added is timestamped, I think.
There's full version control.
Yeah. Has anybody else got anything to add before we finish? No. Okay. Siwan, thank you. And thank you everybody. But Siwan, it's your evening time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you all.
I will find a date for the next meeting and suggest that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.